Okay, chapter 16, lecture 2. This has to do with slavery and Africans' presence in the Americas. It had always existed in some parts of Europe, but from the 16th century it became a fundamental to British and Spanish imperial economies, a plantation economy. And it was not uncommon for Africans to be slaves in Europe prior to this time, and a lot of the Renaissance has historical documentation of Africans being in there, and one that I recall specifically was Albrecht Dürer from the Renaissance. It was driven by a labor shortage. It's supplied by internal African warfare, slave markets on the West African coast, not imposed by Europeans but pre-existing. It began in the 16th century, this is the 1500s, in Spanish America, in the 17th century, in British America, and the slave trade grew in the 18th century because of low fertility rate and high mortality rate of established slaves. Difficult to create stable self-producing population. And you can imagine, the poor treatment of Africans as slaves increased their mortality rate. Slavery in the transatlantic economy. Slave trade dominated by the Portuguese and the Spanish in the 16th century, the Dutch in the 17th, and the English in the 18th. It was part of what was called a triangular trade. And you can see the poor treatment of how slaves were being moved around, shackled at their necks and at their waists. This is a part of the Middle Passage, and you can see how people were laid back to back all the way through and on top of each other. It's a wonder anyone survived the voyage. And here's the major slave trade routes going through that they developed by this time. The experience of slavery is estimated that 9 million Africans or more were brought to the Americas over 4 centuries. Seasoned slaves were worth more than those newly arrived. That means they knew what was going on. Maintenance of ethnic bonds in the New World, African language and religion. Generally accepted that all slaves in plantation societies led difficult lives with little variation. Some slaves mixed Christianity with African religions, and that is true today. One of the factors that continued slavery was racist ideology, which you will see again in chapter 25. It's called social Darwinism. And this is what a plantation would look like during the time. Another one playing their music. One of the greatest contributions of Africans to the Americas is blues and jazz. And we'll stop there.